I never believed in juju. In fact, if you had told me 2 years ago that I, Nelson Eburu, fine boy from Warri, would one day be standing in a dingy herbalist shop holding a bottle of dark green liquid, I would have laughed in your face. But life has a way of humbling a man. This one now Dogu powder, the old half seller said, his voice thick with confidence. Just small for your agbo every morning and madam go carry belle sharp sharp. I eyed the small plastic container suspiciously. The place smelled of dried leaves, burnt incense, and something rotten I didn't want to investigate. I shouldn't have been here. Me, an educated man, a banker for that matter, patronizing a roadside baba that looked like he hadn't bathed in weeks. But desperation is a wicked thing. Blessing and I had been married for 2 years. 2 years of prayers, fasting, and enough bedroom activity to make even Sango jealous. Yet no child. And as if that wasn't bad enough, my mother, Mama Ngozi, had turned my house into a war zone. You go just sit down like Mumu Nelson, she would say, her voice full of accusation. Other men dey born left, right and center. You na only to chop madam food and smile like goat. I clenched my jaw at the memory. I loved Blessing, but the pressure was getting to both of us. We had tried hospitals, tests, and all the scientific grammar doctors were speaking. Nothing. So when my old secondary school friend Tony whispered to me about a tested and trusted herbalist, I decided, why not? I turned back to the old man. You sure say e go work? He grinned, revealing brown, uneven teeth. My pikin, na dis same thing Chief Okafor use before e wife born triplet. If e no work, come back, I go give you double your money. I sighed, paid the man, and tucked the bottle into my pocket. As I stepped out of the dimly lit shop, a loud honk nearly sent me jumping out of my skin. A yellow keke swerved past, and the driver yelled, Oga, you know the look road? Abi you won't die for this worry. I muttered a curse and hurried towards my car. This was a bad idea, but at that moment, with my mother's voice ringing in my ears and my wife's tired eyes haunting me, I was willing to try anything. What was the worst that could happen? I got home late that evening, the herbal mixture tucked inside my pocket like a hidden sin. Blessing was in the kitchen, her back turned to me as she stirred a pot of soup. The aroma of banga filled the air, but my stomach twisted with unease. Nelson, you are late again, she said without turning. Her voice was tired, almost defeated. Walk, I muttered, slipping off my shoes. Walk was always my excuse. It was easier than telling her the truth that I had spent my evening in a dingy herbalist shop buying a concoction that promised to make her womb open like market gates. She sighed and faced me. You ate already? I shook my head. No, just tired. Her eyes softened. She walked up to me and placed a hand on my cheek. You've been so stressed lately. Is it? Is it because of what your mother said? I looked away. My mother never hid her feelings. She wanted a grandchild, and in her eyes, Blessing was feeling. She had even started hinting at me marrying a second wife. Blessing took a deep breath. Nelson, I know this is hard for you. It's hard for me too, but her voice broke and she looked away. I'm trying. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I should have held her. I should have told her I loved her and that we would figure this out together. But instead, I pulled out the small bottle from my pocket and placed it on the table. Her eyes widened. What is that? I forced a smile, something that will help us. Tony recommended it. Her face darkened. Nelson, please tell me this is not what I think it is. It's just herbs, blessing. She scoffed, shaking her head. Herbs? You went to a herbalist? After everything the doctors said, doctors have failed us. My voice came out harsher than I intended. Maybe it's time we tried something different. She folded her arms. So you believe I'm the problem? I exhaled sharply. That's not what I am saying. But that's what your mother is saying, isn't it? Her eyes glistened. Nelson, I have done everything. I have prayed, fasted, taken all the medications, and now you think drinking some herbal nonsense will fix us? I looked at her, at the pain in her eyes, and for the first time I felt ashamed. She wasn't the problem. We didn't even know if I was the problem, but the pressure. Oh, the pressure. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. If you want to drink that thing, do it, but don't expect me to. She turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, holding the bottle like a fool. I had thought this would bring us closer. Instead, it was already tearing us apart. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Blessing had slept in the guest room. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of my choices pressing on me. The small bottle of herbs still sat on the nightstand, a silent reminder of the argument from the night before. A knock at the door startled me. I dragged myself up, expecting Blessing, but when I opened the door, my mother stood there instead. Mama! I frowned, stepping aside to let her in. Why are you here so early? She swept into the house like a queen, inspecting her palace. I came to see my son, she said, eyeing the empty living room. Where is your wife? I sighed. She's getting ready. Mama scoffed. She can't even wake up early to take care of her husband, and you wonder why she can't give you a child. I clenched my jaw. Mama, please. Nelson, listen to me. She lowered herself onto the couch, adjusting her wrapper. I heard what happened yesterday. You went to Baba Efe for herbs. I blinked. How did you? Tony's mother told me. I made a mental note to have a word with Tony later. My mother leaned forward, her expression grave. You should be careful, my son. Not every medicine is safe. Some of these herbalists use things. I scoffed. Mama, you're the one who keeps telling me to do something about our situation. Yes, she said, but there are other ways. Have you thought about testing yourself? I froze. What? You heard me, she said. You keep looking at blessing as the problem. Well, what if it is you? My chest tightened. Mama, I am fine. She gave me a long, knowing look. Are you? I looked away. I had never considered that possibility. The thought of it scared me. Think about it, my son, Mama continued, before you destroy your marriage chasing shadows. Blessing walked into the living room just then, dressed in a simple gown, her face unreadable. She greeted Mama quietly before sitting at the far end of the room. Mama clucked her tongue. Good morning, my dear. I hope you're taking care of my son. Blessing forced a smile. I try. Mama eyed her, then turned back to me. Nelson, I will go now, but remember what I said. She stood up, adjusted her wrapper, and patted my shoulder before walking out the door. I sat there, my mother's words ringing in my ears. What if it is you? Blessing cleared her throat. She's right, you know. I looked at her. About what? She sighed. We have tried everything. Maybe it's time you got tested. My heart pounded. I wanted to argue, to dismiss the idea, but deep down I knew it was time to face the truth. The silence stretched between us like an open wound. Blessing sat stiffly on the couch, her fingers twisting the edge of her gown. I could feel her waiting for my reaction, for an argument, for anything, but I had no words. Nelson, she said softly, we need to know the truth. I clenched my fists. So now you think I am the problem? Her eyes flickered with something. hurt, frustration, maybe even pity. It's not about blame, it's about finding answers. I turned away, my chest tight. All my life, I had been raised to believe that a man's strength was unquestionable. A man provides, a man protects, a man does not lack. And now, my own life was suggesting that maybe I was the one who no, I stood abruptly. I don't need a test, I said, forcing calm into my voice. I know I am fine. Blessing exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Knowing isn't the same as proving, Nelson. I glared at her. You don't believe in me, do you? She flinched but held her ground. This isn't about belief, it's about facts. I paced the room, my mind racing. The idea of walking into a clinic, of sitting in a cold room while a doctor scrutinized me, of hearing words that could shatter everything I believed about myself, it made my skin crawl. I had always imagined fatherhood as a certainty, something that would come naturally, like my father before me and his father before him. But what if? No, I refused to entertain the thought. A knock at the door interrupted my turmoil. I opened to find Tony standing there, hands in his pockets, his face unreadable. Bro, he said cautiously, can we talk? I stepped aside, letting him in. He glanced at Blessing, then at me. I heard your mom came by. I nodded, crossing my arms. She thinks I should get tested. Tony sighed. She's not wrong. I stiffened. Not you too. He held up his hands. Listen, man, I get it. It is not easy. But if there is a chance, any chance, that the issue isn't with Blessing, don't you want to know? Blessing spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. I just want us to stop guessing, Nelson. I rubbed my temples. And what if the test says I'm the problem? Tony shrugged. Then you deal with it like a man. His words stung. Like a man? I had spent my entire life proving I was a man, and now the very thing that defined manhood, creating life, was in question. I swallowed hard, my pride warring with my reason. Finally, I exhaled and looked at Blessing. I'll do it. Her eyes widened. You will? I nodded slowly. Let's get tested. Her lips parted as if she couldn't believe I had agreed. Then, for the first time in weeks, I saw it, the faintest glimmer of hope in her eyes. Tony patted my shoulder. Good call, bro. But as I sat back down, dread coiled in my stomach. What if the results changed everything? The clinic smelled of antiseptic and uncertainty. I sat stiffly on the chair, my hands clenched into fists on my lap. Blessing sat beside me, her fingers laced together so tightly her knuckles were white. A nurse had already taken my semen sample. Now all we could do was wait. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly, each second stretching into eternity. Blessing cleared her throat. Are you okay? I didn't answer immediately. I wasn't okay. My chest felt tight and my palms were damp. I had never been afraid of test results before. Not in school, not during job interviews, not even during my routine health checkups. But this was different. What if I hesitated, forcing myself to meet her eyes? What if I can't give you children? She reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. Then we'll figure it out together. I wanted to believe her, but deep down, I knew things were never that simple. The doctor finally stepped in, a file in his hands. My heart pounded so loudly I barely heard his words at first. Mr. Nelson, he said, flipping through the pages, your results are back. I forced myself to sit up straighter and he adjusted his glasses. Your sperm count is significantly low. The air left my lungs. Low? What does that mean? Blessing asked, her voice shaking. The doctor sighed. It means that while there's still a chance of conception, it's much lower than average. It could be due to several factors: lifestyle, stress, genetics. He paused. We need to run more tests to determine the cause. I stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. Low sperm count? This wasn't supposed to happen to me. The doctor continued speaking, explaining possible treatment, lifestyle changes, medical interventions, but his voice faded in the background. All I could hear was the echo of my mother's words. A man must bear fruit. Blessing was watching me, her eyes filled with emotions I couldn't decipher. Pity, concern, relief that the problem wasn't hers. I couldn't stay in that room any longer. I stood abruptly, mumbling something about fresh air, and walked out. The world outside the clinic felt too bright, too harsh. I leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. I had come here seeking answers. Now that I had them, I wasn't sure I could handle the truth. I stood outside the clinic, my mind drowning in the weight of the doctor's words. Significantly low sperm count? I had never thought of myself as anything less than a complete man, but now, with just a few words, my entire identity felt like it was crumbling. The door creaked open behind me. Blessing stepped out, her eyes searching mine. Nelson. She reached for my arm, but I took a step back. I wasn't ready for her comfort. Not yet. I just need a moment, I muttered, my voice hoarse. She didn't argue. She simply stood there, watching me. A group of people passed by, chatting and laughing as if the world wasn't falling apart. I envied them. I envied their ignorance of the kind of news that could shake a man to his core. A child, my parents had always said that was a man's true legacy, and now that legacy was in jeopardy. Blessing finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. This doesn't change who you are, Nelson. I let out a bitter laugh. Doesn't it? She stepped closer. It doesn't. You are still the man I married. I turned to her, searching her face for doubt, for regret, but all I saw was sincerity. Then why do I feel less? My voice cracked on the last word. Because society has poisoned us into believing that fertility defines manhood, she said, her eyes flashing. But I married you not just for your ability to make children. Her words should have comforted me. They should have eased the tightness in my chest, but they didn't. Because deep down, I knew the world wouldn't see it that way. My mother, my father, the entire village that had been waiting for our child. Would they see me as a man if I couldn't give them a grandson? Would I? I exhaled shakily, rubbing a hand down my face. What now? She took my hands in hers. We take the next step. We find solutions together. Her faith in me should have been enough. But as I looked into her eyes, a dark fear settled in my chest. Would she always feel this way, or was this the beginning of a slow, inevitable drift apart? The ride home was silent. Blessing sat beside me, a hand resting on my thigh, offering assurance I wasn't sure I deserved. My thoughts were loud, crashing against each other like waves in a storm. As we pulled into the compound, I noticed my mother sitting outside, her wrapper tied loosely around her chest. She stood up the moment she saw us. Her sharp eyes scanning my face. How did it go? As we pulled into the compound, I noticed my mother sitting outside, her wrapper tied loosely around her chest. She stood up the moment she saw us, her sharp eyes scanning my face. How did it go? She asked, before I had even stepped out of the car. Blessing and I exchanged a glance. My heart pounded. How could I tell her? It went fine, Mama, I said, forcing a tight smile. She narrowed her eyes. Fine? Then why do you look like a man who has just seen a ghost? Blessing reached for my hand, squeezing it gently, but her presence alone couldn't shield me from my mother's piercing gaze. Nelson, you know you can talk to me, she pressed, stepping closer. Did the doctor say something? My throat felt dry. I glanced at Blessing again, but she gave me a small nod, silently telling me to do what felt right. I sighed, running a hand over my face. Mama, the doctor said my sperm count is low. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. Saying them out loud made them more real. For a moment, she just stared at me. Then, slowly, her expression shifted. First to confusion, then to something else, something colder. What do you mean? She asked, her voice tight. I swallowed hard. It means it might be difficult for us to have a child. She took a step back as if I had slapped her. God forbid, she whispered, shaking her head. That cannot be. I felt a fresh wave of shame wash over me. Mama, no, she snapped. This is not our portion. It must be a mistake. We will go to another doctor, a proper one. Blessing stiffened beside me, but she didn't say a word. Mama, the test was accurate. I tried again. She waved me off. Nonsense! You are my son, the son of your father. This is not your destiny. Her voice rose. Do you know what people will say? Do you know what this means? My hands clenched into fists. I had known this reaction was coming, but it still hit me like a punch to the gut. Blessing finally stepped in. Mama, this is not the end. There are treatments. My mother turned to her sharply. And what if those treatments don't work? Her voice was sharp, almost accusatory. Will you stay with him, or will you start looking for another man to give you children? Mama! I barked, shocked by her words. Blessing inhaled sharply, hot flashing in her eyes, but she didn't back down. I married Nelson for love, not just for children, she said, her voice steady. My mother scoffed. Love is sweet, my dear, but when years pass and there is no child to call your own, love will turn bitter. She turned back to me. Nelson, my son, do not let this be your story. You must find a way to fix this. Do whatever it takes. She stormed into the house, leaving us standing in the cool evening air. Blessing let out a slow breath. Are you okay? I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. Deep in my chest, a fear was growing. What if my mother was right? What if love wasn't enough? The night was heavy with silence. Blessing had gone to bed early, but I could hear her restless shifting on the mattress. My mother's words had planted something in her, something neither of us dared to say out loud. I sat on the couch, my phone in hand, scrolling mindlessly through the internet. My mind had been restless for days, and my heart felt like a heavy stone in my chest. I needed answers. I needed to know why. The doctor had mentioned treatment options, but there was no guarantee. I had spent the last hours reading articles and forums, each one filled with stories of men who tried everything and still failed. As I read through different articles, my eyes suddenly stopped on a sentence that sent cold shivers down my spine. Herbal concoctions used for boosting sexual performance can lead to low sperm count. Whoa! I blinked. My fingers tightened around the phone. Wait, could that be it? I quickly skimmed through the rest of the page. Diabetes, infection, smoking, alcohol, obesity. All of these made sense, but herbal mixtures, the same manpower I had been gulping like water in my shower days, my chest tightened. I knew I had lived recklessly, running after women like a goat chasing guguru, jumping from one woman to another, taking all sorts of native concoctions just to prove I was a man. I had been foolish, stupid, and now I was paying the price. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I dressed up quickly and rushed to see my doctor. As I sat in his office, I felt a lump in my throat. My palms were sweaty, my heart thumping like a talking drum. Doctor, I finally said, my voice low, I need to ask you something. I need the truth. He leaned forward. Go ahead, Nelson. I swallowed. All those herbal drinks and roots I used to take. You know the ones that help a man perform. Can they cause low sperm count? His face didn't change, but I could see the confirmation in his eyes before he even spoke. Yes, Nelson, he said, they can. Some of those mixtures contain harmful substances that damage sperm production over time. I exhaled sharply, dragging my palm down my face. I had done this to myself. Is there a solution? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. The doctor sighed. You have options: adoption, assisted reproductive therapy like IVF, and of course, lifestyle changes. He listed them one by one, his voice steady and firm. Eat healthy and exercise, reduce stress and get enough sleep, quit smoking and alcohol, take foods rich in antioxidants and zinc, things like vegetables, nuts, and fish. Stay hydrated and take supplements like vitamin D, folic acid. Medical treatments too, if necessary, like hormone therapy to address hormonal imbalance. Medications like clomiphene citrate to stimulate sperm production. And most importantly, he added, pray. Medicine has its own limits, but God has no limits. I nodded, barely able to breathe. I left his office feeling like someone had poured a bucket of cold water over my head. I had a lot of work to do. That evening, as I approached my front door, something felt off. I paused, my ears picking up hushed voices inside. Blessing, think about it, a familiar voice was saying. Nelson doesn't have to know. You want a child, Abby? Let me help you. We can keep this between us. I froze. I knew that voice. I kicked the door open with a force that sent it slamming against the wall. The room went dead silent. My so-called best friend, Tony, sat across from Blessing, looking like someone who had just seen a spirit. His mouth hung open, his face drained of color. Blessing got up from her seat. Nelson, it's not what you think. I turned my glare to him. Wetin you talk just now? Talk am again make I hear. He stammered, shaking his head. Nothing. I was just, you dey craze? My voice boomed through the room. You sit down for my house, chop my food, call yourself my friend, and you won't sleep with my wife? Nelson, please, get out. He looked at me, at Blessing, then back at me. He knew I wasn't bluffing. With his tail between his legs, he bolted out of the house like a rat chased by fire. I turned to Blessing, my chest still heaving. She reached for my hand, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. I swear, I would never do that to you. I took a deep breath, then pulled her into my arms. I know, but something in me shifted that night. If I wasn't careful, I was going to lose everything. From that day, I did everything the doctor advised. I was not a smoker, but I stopped taking alcohol. I took the drugs prescribed by the doctors, exercised, ate better, and prayed harder than I had ever prayed before. It wasn't easy. There were nights I almost gave up, but Blessing was my rock, my anchor. She kept reminding me that miracles still happened. And then one morning, I woke up to find her standing in front of me, a pregnancy test in her shaking hands. Nelson, she whispered, her voice barely audible. It's positive. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. I grabbed the test from her, my eyes scanning it over and over. Are you sure? My voice cracked. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. We are having a baby, Nelson. I dropped to my knees, my head in my hands. Jesus, Jesus, thank you, Jesus. Blessing. I dropped to my knees, my hand. I dropped to my knees, my head in my hands. Jesus, Jesus, thank you. Blessing knelt beside me, and I held her like my life depended on it. It had taken pain, sacrifice, and faith, but at last our miracle had come. The days that followed felt like a dream. Blessing and I held onto each other tighter than ever. Every morning I woke up thanking God. Every night I placed my hand on her stomach, whispering prayers over the life growing inside her. But deep down, I carried a weight, an unspoken vow I had made to myself. I would never go back to the man I used to be. No more reckless living, no more herbal concoctions, no more chasing after things that didn't matter. This was my second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. But life has a way of testing your resolve. One afternoon, I was at the office going through some reports when my phone buzzed. It was an unsaved number. Hello, I answered. Nelson, you just forgot me like that. I frowned. The voice was familiar, too familiar. Who is this? A soft chuckle. Baby, it's me, Vanessa. Blood drained from my face. Vanessa? One of my old flings back in the day. She was one of my regulars, a woman who always had a way of pulling me into her trap. Why are you calling me? I asked, already irritated. Relax, nah. Can't I just check up on an old friend? I almost laughed. Old friend? After all these years, I knew how this game worked. I'm married, Vanessa, I said firmly. Married no be sickness, she poured. I just miss you. Let's hang out like before. Just one drink. I clenched my jaw. Just one drink? That was how it always started. I glanced at the framed picture of Blessing on my desk. Her bright smile lighting up the room. My wife, the woman who had stood by me through everything, the woman carrying my child. Vanessa, lose my number. Before she could respond, I ended the call and blocked her. I exhaled, rubbing my temples. That was close. Blessing's pregnancy came with its own challenges. Some days she was glowing and full of life. Other days she was exhausted, her body aching in ways I couldn't understand. I did my best to be the husband she deserved. I cooked when she was too tired. I massaged her feet when they swelled. I ran to the market to buy whatever cravings she had, sometimes at odd hours of the night. One night, she nudged me awake. Nelson, she whispered, shaking my arm. I groaned. What is it? I want suya. I squinted at the clock. Blessing, it's past midnight. She pouted, placing my hand on her belly. Your child wants suya. I sighed heavily, but got up. The things a man does for love. I drove to the suya spot down the street, hoping the Aboki man was still open. Fortunately, he was. Oga Nelson, long time. Na midnight cravings bring you come, he teased as he cut the pieces of suya. My wife no go allow me rest, I said, shaking my head. He laughed, wrapping up the suya. Na so e be. But congratulations, my brother. Na big blessing you get so. I smiled as I collected the package. Yes, a big blessing indeed. The months flew by, and before we knew it, we were in the delivery room. I stood beside Blessing, gripping her hand as she screamed through the contractions. My heart pounded. I had never felt so helpless in my life. Push, madam, push! The nurse encouraged. Blessing squeezed my hand so tight I thought she would break my fingers. Then, after what felt like an eternity, a sharp cry filled the room. It's a boy, the doctor announced. Tears welled up in my eyes as they placed my son in Blessing's arms. He was tiny, his skin soft and wrinkled, his little fingers curling around mine. I had never seen anything more beautiful. We did it, Blessing, I whispered, kissing her forehead. God did it, she corrected, smiling weakly. I nodded. Yes, God had truly done it. As I held my son for the first time, I knew one thing for sure: my life would never be the same again. The end.
I hope you enjoyed this story. Please like, share, and subscribe for more stories. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your day.